Jessica Lange is a film and TV legend and one of the greatest living actors.
She's also portrayed some of American Horror Story's best characters ever. Let's start at the very beginning.
Shining like a fiery beacon.
Lange made her first appearance in a supporting role in Season 1's Murder House, playing the Harmons' next-door neighbor, Constance Langdon. From the outside, she seemed like a kind and gentle Southern belle, but as we came to find out, she was quite mischievous and downright evil. A little background on Constance. Years ago, she moved to Los Angeles in pursuit of an acting career, but those dreams ended when she objected to the growing emphasis on nudity in the film industry. Constance eventually married Hugo Langdon, and they raised a family together in the Murder House. Now, Hugo was a car salesman, but he was also a very horrible human being. He had an affair with their maid, Moira O'Hara, but Moira quickly realized that it was a mistake and promised it would never happen again. Hugo continued to make advances though, and in one instance, he forced himself on her against her own will. That's when Constance walked in on them, gun in hand, and killed them both.
You've broken my heart for the last time.
That meant their souls would remain at the murder house for good. As for the children, they never found out the truth about their father's disappearance, believing that he had ran away and abandoned the family. Constance soon became deeply depressed and turned to the bottle. Without Hugo's salary, they no longer had the means to live in the murder house. Ultimately, they were forced to move out when the bank repossessed their home. But she didn't stay away for long. Constance soon seduced Larry Harvey, a banker who had moved into the murder house with his family. Larry fell in love with Constance and told his wife Lorraine that he planned to leave her for Constance. Lorraine then locked herself in their daughter's room and set all three of them on fire. Following the deaths of Harvey's wife and children, Constance and her kids moved back into the murder house once again. Constance didn't get a lot of Mom of the Year awards, let's say. In fact, she had some pretty damn terrifying means of punishing her kids, like locking Addie in this closet filled with mirrors, and keeping Bo chained up in the attic. She's horrible, actually. This all came to a head in 1994 when Constance was going to be charged with child neglect for her treatment of Bo. She refused to let Child Protection Services take Bo away, so instead she thought it would be a better idea to just kill him. She convinced Larry to smother Bo with a pillow and claimed that her son had died of natural causes. The poor kid's spirit was thus trapped in the attic for good. Okay, she's extremely horrible. More family tragedy struck later that year as Tate hit his breaking point in 1994. He terrorized Westfield High School, committing a mass shooting which took the lives of 15 innocent students. Following the murders, he returned home, and as Constance pleaded for his life, he was shot dead by the SWAT team. Tate then joined the rest of the spirits in the murder house. Fast forward to present day at the start of Season 1. Constance welcomes the Harmons to the murder house with open arms. Well, actually, she steals some of Vivian's jewelry and silverware, and bakes the Harmons cupcakes with 1 part ipecac and 1 part spit. In all honesty, she's a horrible neighbor and a horrible mom. That Halloween, though, more tragedy struck the Langdon family. Addie is hit by a car and killed while trick-or-treating. In one of the season's most horrifying and heartbreaking moments, Constance stops the paramedics from trying to save Addie's life, and instead she tries dragging her lifeless body onto the murder house property. She was hoping to have her daughter's soul attached to the house rather than never seeing her again.
Oh, Jake! Oh my God, Addie! Oh no! Oh no!
No matter how tough Constance was on Addie, she was clearly crushed by this loss. She then turned to the help of medium Billie Dean Howard to speak to her once more. Addie explained that she was glad her mother didn't succeed in attaching her soul to the murder house. Addie didn't want to be trapped there for all eternity with the other spirits, including her brother Tate, whom she despises greatly. Constance learned quite a bit more from Billie Dean Howard, specifically what would be the result of a human and spirit conception.
If the devil's going to use a human womb for his spawn, he's gonna want a little more bang for his buck.
Yep, she's talking about the Antichrist Michael Langdon who will bring about the end of times. Constance was particularly interested in this because Vivian is pregnant with her son Tate's child. Actually, twins, but the alpha being Michael. Her plan is to take the child as her own and raise it. We all know how this ends up. It's not long until Vivian goes into labor. Instead of rushing to the hospital, she opts for a home birth. A murder house birth. The Harmons have no other options than to allow the spirits of the house to help in the delivery. That's right, Charles Montgomery and 2 murdered nurses take over. The first child, appearing to be stillborn, takes just 1 breath before passing away, thus trapping yet another soul in the house. The second child, Michael, is a fittingly violent delivery. Vivian loses too much blood herself and passes over during childbirth, joining her daughter Violet as well. The young boy is whisked away and cleaned up by Constance. She takes a pretty aggressive approach to babysitting her grandson, and puts up a bit of resistance when Ben comes over to take him. Alone and with only his young son, Ben attempts to commit suicide until he's talked out of it by Vivian and Violet.
I want you to take the baby, and I want you to leave this house, and I want you to never come back.
But just as he's about to leave, Stage 5 spiritual clinger Hayden and 2 other ghosts hang him from the chandelier. Ben's spirit too joins the rest of the family for an eternal stay at the murder house.
Now we have all the time in the world.
Following some subpar police work, Constance makes off with Michael Langdon. A few short years later, she finds out that this kid is going to be a bloody handful.
Now what am I gonna do with you?
Now, Lange returned to reprise her role as Constance in Season 8's Apocalypse. We fast forward to 2017, when Madison Montgomery and Behold Chablis visit the murder house in hopes of learning more about Michael Langdon's upbringing. It's Constance that welcomes the witches into her home and reveals how she raised Michael. Let's just say it wasn't easy for good old Grandma. As a young child, Michael had uncontrollable urges to kill. This, of course, included the nanny and then some small animals around the house. It progressed further. Michael killed a priest that was sent to help him, nearly strangled his grandmother to death.
You don't tell me what to do anymore.
And oh, let's not forget, aged a decade overnight, like the evil version of Tom Hanks in Big. When Grandma Constance couldn't take it anymore, she took her own life. This destroyed Michael and sent him into an even darker spiral, ultimately fulfilling his destiny as the Antichrist.
Father, I'm with you now.
Thankfully, Mallory was able to travel back in time and kill Michael with an SUV. Yeah, that happened. And just like with Addie, Constance was given the opportunity to save Michael and bring his body back to the murder house property. Instead, she made the right call and chose to let him die. I'm still not sure why Satan couldn't just bring him back to life right there.
Lange returned for a second season of AHS in a more prominent role. For Asylum, she portrayed Briarcliff Manor's head nun, Sister Jude, aka Judy Martin. Fun fact, while she admits that Freak Show is her favorite season, Lange still considers Asylum to be the best season overall. A little backstory on Judy. Years ago, her fiancé left her the night before their wedding. She soon found herself spending more of her time in nightclubs as a performer. She also picked up a bad drinking habit. It all came to a head one night when she was involved in a drunk driving accident. She believed that she had killed a young girl. She fled the scene and tried to forget about the incident for years. When cops come to question her about the hit and run, she leaves in a panic and has another drink and again crashes her car. This accident brought her to the Catholic Church, literally. She woke up on the church doorsteps. Judy would then devote the rest of her life to the church, ultimately becoming head nun of Briarcliff Manor, where she would go by the name Sister Jude, named after the patron saint of lost causes. As the asylum manager, Jude was, how do we say this? Tough. Really tough. The first time we meet her, she's in the middle of punishing Shelley by shaving her head. Now, the reason Briarcliff Manor makes the newspaper headlines is because of the Bloody Face murders. Everyone assumes that Kit Walker is responsible for the murders when his wife goes missing, when in fact, they were abducted by aliens. Now, that's a whole different story. This attracts up-and-coming journalist Lana Winters to the asylum, who says she's there to do a story on the Briarcliff Bakery. Eventually, Jude finds out about Lana's secret plan after she sneaks into the asylum after hours. This is when we see the really dark side of Sister Jude. She commits Lana herself into the asylum against her will, and blackmails Lana's partner Wendy into complying. Jude's plan is to treat Lana with electric shock therapy. This is as horrible as you would expect. But then the devil comes knocking. A young man named Jed is brought to the asylum who's been possessed by the devil. An exorcism is performed, Jed is killed, and the devil takes possession of poor Sister Mary Eunice. This is bad news for Jude. With the devil inside her, Sister Mary Eunice gets pretty aggressive. She repeatedly taunts Jude's past indiscretions and confronts Dr. Arden's twisted fantasies. This ultimately drives Jude a bit mad and breaks her sobriety. Throughout her time at the asylum, Jude also butts heads with Dr. Arden a handful of times. This is due to Arden's mysterious past and his disdain for her faith.
If you can manage to stay out of my business, I'll try and stay out of yours.
There's a constant power struggle between these two, with the Monsignor playing the middleman. Jude would eventually discover Arden's horrific past and his human experiments, but she's powerless to do anything because the devil-possessed sister Mary Eunice won't let her. And Jude's most significant moment comes when she's face to face with the Angel of Death, Skaha. We find out that Jude had a handful of close calls with death, but it's not her time just yet.
Peace is so close, sister. I'm ready. But I need to do one last thing.
Filled with guilt, Jude visits the family home of Missy Stone, the girl she ran over years ago. As she's about to confess to the family, Missy walks into the room. For years she thought she had killed the young girl, but thankfully she had survived.
I thought someone ran over you. I thought you died out there on the street. You mean back then when I was a girl?
Jude would return to Asylum with renewed vigor. Problem is, Sister Mary Eunice is just too damn powerful at this point. For a moment, it seemed like Dr. Arden would help Jude in her fight against Mary, but he betrays her and they send in the psychotic Lee Emerson to take Jude out. Thankfully, Jude is able to fend for herself. But that's not the end of her troubles. She's soon framed for the murder of Frank McCann. In addition to that, everyone has noticed how seemingly unstable and delusional Jude has seemed to be as of late. The next time we see Jude, she's restrained in a bed of her own at Briarcliff. Like Lana Winters before her, Jude is given electroshock therapy, leaving her in a near catatonic state. She doesn't remember anything, who she is, or the people's names around her. This is when we're all blessed with one of the highlights of Season 2, the name game.
The name game. Judy, 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 bo booty, banana, fana, fo foodie, fee, fi, mo moody.
The name game musical number is Jude's reality-bending, delusional dance-along that showcases Lange's incredible range. It's one of the few moments of the show where you can't help but smile when you're watching it.
Come on, everybody. I say now let's play a game.
Jude tries to make amends with Lana as well. She apologizes for all the horrendous things she committed, and tries to get Lana freed from the asylum. Unfortunately, she's powerless. Jude gets more accustomed to life as a Briarcliff patient. Well, she has no other choice. She looks out for friends, like Pepper, and challenges the Monsignor on his choices. Speaking of Timothy Howard, he's pretty horrible. When Lana returns to the asylum in hopes to free Jude, he tells Lana that she had committed suicide. In reality, he had Jude in solitary confinement because she was causing too much trouble for him. As the years pass, Jude becomes even more delusional and loses any hope that she will ever see life outside the asylum. But then Kit steps in. We love you, Kit. Following the deaths of Grace and Alma, Kit frequently visits with Jude in Asylum. Eventually, he forces her out of Briarcliff and takes her into his home. It's not easy, but he helps Jude recover from her extremely traumatic time at the asylum. On one occasion, Jude flipped out and attacked Kit and his children, Julia and Thomas.
I won't go back in that hole. I will not. You can't make me.
But these aren't any normal kids. They take Jude out for a walk and she comes back happier than ever. For a good 6 months, Jude is a part of the family, teaching the children how to dance and sharing her years of wisdom. But she ultimately becomes ill and is finally ready for that final kiss from Skaha.
Lange followed up that incredible performance with yet another, Fiona Goode in Season 3's Coven.
Who's the baddest witch in town?
Fiona was obsessed with finding eternal youth and keeping control of her vast powers as Supreme Witch. But how she became Supreme is a bit questionable. See, back in 1971, a young Fiona murdered the former Supreme and covered it up. She then took control of the Coven despite being a murderer and unfit for the position. Throughout the Coven season, we learn that she will do literally anything, including multiple murders, for self-gain. When we first meet Fiona, she's visiting the doctor about a new drug that could possibly reverse aging. Against the doctor's wishes, she starts taking the drug but finds that it doesn't actually work. Fiona's not very happy and takes it out on the poor doc, killing him and draining his life force. We then find out that Fiona doesn't have a great relationship with her daughter Cordelia, and it makes a lot of sense. See, Fiona has always been selfish, living a life of luxury and traveling the world. She put herself before any other relationships and people, including her own daughter. Cordelia doesn't want her around, but Fiona demands to stay and help teach the young students how to be proper witches. In actuality, she's pitting them against each other and using them in order to continue her own search for eternal youth. Again, she doesn't care for anyone or anything besides herself.
When are you gonna die and stop ruining my life?
On a class field trip out in the French Quarter, Fiona uses Nan to track down Delphine Lalaurie, who was cursed with immortality and buried alive. Fiona soon pays the voodoo queen Marie Laveau a visit because she can grant immortality. But Marie justifiably doesn't like Fiona and she declines to be of any help.
The hammer wants the nails magic. Oh, that is rich.
Fiona seeks out other options, like a plastic surgeon to make herself look young again. She's unable to get any surgery due to her being diagnosed with cancer. As Fiona slowly withers away, a new Supreme is rising. The problem is, Fiona doesn't know who it is. So her plan? Kill the rising Supreme in hopes it will stop her from dying. When she becomes convinced that it's Madison, she again murders one of her own. And again, she has the butler Spaulding cover up the murder. Eventually, a witches and warlocks council is called in to investigate Madison's disappearance. Not only does Fiona get away with murder, she also frames longtime nemesis Myrtle Snow.
We're all a bunch of little toads in a pot that Fiona is slowly bringing to a boil. I'd rather burn than boil.
Don't worry, Myrtle will get her revenge. Now, while investigating Madison's murder herself, Zoe accidentally summons the Axeman, a serial killer who was stabbed to death by witches back in his time. He soon falls in love with Fiona. They have a fling, but Fiona's health is continuing to spiral, which should be a clue of the Rising Supreme's identity. Speaking of which, Cordelia discovers just how horrible her mother really is after Madison and Myrtle are resurrected. Together, the Coven organizes against Fiona.
Madison. Surprise, bitch. I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
In a last-ditch effort to stay alive, Fiona teams up with Marie Laveau and contacts Papa Legba. He demands an innocent soul, so they kill Nan. Again, Fiona is horrible. On the flip side, at least she helped wipe out the witch hunters with the help of the Axeman. Ultimately, and unsurprisingly, it's Cordelia who ascends to Supreme after passing the 7 Wonders and resurrecting Zoe.
Behold, the one true Supreme.
Obviously, Fiona and her daughter had a strained relationship, but they were able to share one last touching moment before she passed. The final moments of Fiona's life were perhaps her most honest.
You're scared. Maybe for the first time in your life. No powers, no magic. Just a woman facing the inevitable.
For her final full-time role in American Horror Story, Lange portrayed Elsa Mars, the ringleader of a freak show.
You mind closing out your check now? I'm going on break.
Oh, darling. It's on the house. Stars never pay.
Elsa's Cabinet of Curiosities was a traveling carnival that settled in Jupiter, Florida in the 1950s. Before the freak show, Elsa was a singer with aspirations to become an international star. Over the course of the season, we find out that Elsa has a dark and mysterious past. Back in the 1930s, Elsa spent her time as a dominatrix in a German sex club, where she became famous and even charged top dollar to let audiences watch her perform. But one horrible night, she was drugged and forced into doing a snuff film. Her legs were amputated with a chainsaw by none other than Hans Gruber, aka Dr. Arden. Yep, that guy. He has a thing for cutting off limbs. Luckily, Elsa was saved by Massimo, a soldier who was in love with her. She wasn't too thrilled about it as she wanted to die after being mutilated. Fast forward to when we first meet Elsa, she sneaks her way into a hospital in order to get a closer look at the conjoined twins Bet and Dot Tatler. She sees them as potential headliners in her freak show and eventually convinces them to join. But the twins soon overshadow even Elsa herself. Turns out that Dot is an extremely good singer and Elsa wasn't too happy about it. She takes her anger out by practicing knife throwing skills, something that would come in handy later on. It just so happens that Dandy Mott is a big fan of the twins, so Elsa sends them off to live with him. Good luck, girls. Elsa is soon visited by the legendary spirit Edward Mordrake, whom she reveals her dark past to. She begs him to take her life right there, and he nearly does, but she'll have to wait.
You hear music?
Elsa then meets Stanley, who's one of the most vile humans we've met on the show. He pretends to be a TV producer interested in Elsa when in fact he's a lifelong con artist looking to make as much money as he can off the freak show. He plans to kill them one by one and sell their remains to a museum. Many of the freaks fear that Elsa is only focused on her own well-being and that she'll ditch them as soon as her Hollywood opportunity presents itself. No one really trusts her, especially since the twins' disappearance. Even her longtime confidant Ethel, played by the remarkable Kathy Bates, is having second thoughts about Elsa's intentions. And she has a good point. point. Elsa practices her knife-throwing skills with her secret lover, Paul, and nearly kills him. On top of it, she doesn't show any remorse. And this all comes to a head in a showdown between Elsa and Ethel. Remember, Ethel had been questioning Elsa's decision-making for quite some time. She overheard Elsa's plan with Stanley to murder Bet and Dot, and that was pretty much the end of their close relationship.
No.
Yep, Ethel shot Elsa in her leg and immediately finds out that she has prosthetics. She finds out about Elsa's horrific past and that she has much more in common with the others than she led everyone to believe. Despite the revelation, Elsa still has a feeling that Ethel wants to kill her, so she plans to do it first. Elsa invites Ethel into her room and plans to poison her drink. Ethel is prepared for it and has her gun handy to finally kill Elsa for all the shady stuff she's done with the freak show. But remember, Elsa has been practicing her knife-throwing skills. Elsa kills her close friend with a perfectly thrown dagger to the forehead. With good old Stanley's help, they cover up the murder and make it look like a harmless car accident. The freaks want revenge. They know Elsa is responsible for all of this. Unfortunately, Elsa flees from her own show and sells the Cabinet of Curiosities to Dandy Mott. She clearly doesn't care about any of them. By the 1960s, Elsa's Hollywood dreams had come true. She became a famous singer and star of the Elsa Mars Hour, but she still can't escape her past as well as the horrible things she's done. She finds out that her adult films from decades ago have been discovered and the TMZ of the time is going to reveal them to the public. She also finds out that nearly all of her old friends in the freak show have been murdered by Dandy Mott. With no options left as her show is on the cusp of getting canceled, Elsa agrees to one final performance, a farewell show which falls fittingly on Halloween.
Oh, we can be heroes just for one day.
Once again, Mordrake is summoned and he grants her final wish to pass on, but he explains that she doesn't belong to his group of spirits. Her home is elsewhere. In the afterlife, Elsa finds herself back with her freak show, and to be honest, the freaks might be a bit too happy to see her. Let's not forget how horrible she was to them. Regardless, Elsa is extremely remorseful and apologizes to everyone. Together again, the freak show performs one final time.
So which Jessica Lange performance is your favorite? Mine has to be Sister Jude. Let us know yours in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed for more American Horror Story videos. Thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.